What's good? I haven't done this in such a long time. But I was thinking, you know what? You have absolutely nothing to do right now and you're trying to waste your time. So let me help you with that. I put a list together of 27 is gonna take a while. 27 movies from the past 10 years that I think are worth recommending. They're my 27 favorites. If you're into filmmaking, dope. If you're not into filmmaking, also kind of dope. If I were to make this video about 5 years ago, this would be in the top 3, no question. It's the first movie that made me really think about structure in a very different way and how to tell a story and the many options you have in telling a story. Ryan Gosling plays this really dope guy who kind of just robs banks, so is he dope? I don't know. I think it's still pretty cool. You got Bradley Cooper playing a really shady cop. You got Dane DeHaan, he's kind of just chilling the whole time. It's a movie I could really recommend to anybody. I think it's great. You should definitely check it out. Moonlight, it won Best Picture. It almost didn't win Best Picture. That was crazy. But I think it's one of the Best Picture winners of the past ever. Everything about this movie is pretty great. The acting, the story, the characters, the themes, the importance, the structure of the story. Once again, this is another movie that has a really unique structure to it. But I think my favorite thing about Moonlight is the cinematography combined with the color grade. It's just the most beautiful combination of the entire decade for me. I love the colors that pop, the way the camera moves is just so smooth and it's just so great. I think it makes Miami feel really lived in. I haven't really seen a movie depict Miami in this way. And it just feels like one of the most lived-in movies I've ever seen, if that makes any sort of sense whatsoever. Not gonna lie to you, I used to think The Revenant was pretty overrated. I always thought it was like a good movie, but I never thought it was the great movie. But you know what? I love my boy Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu is by far one of my favorite filmmakers. I think the man's extremely talented. And The Revenant, it's great. I would not call The Revenant an action movie, but it does have the most well-directed action scenes of the entire decade. I spent a lot of my time figuring out how movies are made, what kind of styles or things I could do to try and recreate certain things or things I find interesting and spin into my own. And every time I analyze The Revenant's action scenes, I have no idea how they pulled it off. The star of this movie, though, is Emmanuel Lubezki. The man is my favorite cinematographer, no question. He just has this style that is just in a different league of his own. Like, the images he gets in this movie are just, they're unbelievable. Like, I don't know how he is a human being. He might be Jesus. He's my Jesus anyway. I don't know. I'm on Letterboxd right now, and I can literally go to my review of when I first saw Annihilation. Yep, my opinion hasn't changed. Denis Villeneuve made all these movies right here in the past 10 years. He's an absolute beast when it comes to just pushing out great movies. I recommend all of these. They're all great. They're all honorable mentions. But Incendies is his best movie, in my opinion. I'm not sure if it's Incendies, not sure if it's Incendie, because it's French. My old roommate's actually French, so I asked him how you pronounce it. Leo! But if I were to teach a class on how to tell a story, I'd probably just pop on Incendies and walk out of the room because you don't really need anything else. This man knows how to tell stories. He's proven that time and time again this decade. But I genuinely, from the bottom of my heart, do believe this is his best movie. And I do think he will top it one day. But I haven't seen that day yet. If we're being honest here, I think this movie is kind of lame. But it's borderline not lame enough. I gave it 5 stars. I don't know. I don't think it's lame. But it is just so lame. There's a lot of movies on this list that are about artists that are definitely more entertaining than this one. This is about a poet that drives a bus. So if that doesn't sound interesting to you, you're definitely not going to like the movie. But I do think there's a lot of interesting questions in this about what is important to you as an artist, what is important about the art you're trying to create, what do you actually need in your life that makes your art important, and just like everything in between. Does your life have to be this over dramatic thing to create interesting art? There's a lot of really good questions in Paterson that I really like, and it takes place in Paterson, New Jersey, so I'm Jersey biased. I don't know if I'd recommend this to your family, but it's definitely a good one. I think a lot of horror movies are just kind of lame nowadays. I don't think a lot of them are good. There's only a handful on this list, but The Witch, when I first saw it, I was like, this could be the best horror movie I've ever seen. I don't know. It's a very slow horror movie. There's not really many jump scares in it, so if that's what you think of when you think of horror movies, you're not going to like it. It takes place in a long time ago, so they speak in this really old English, which you might need to take a second to adapt to, but once you get into it, and if you get into it, it is so rewarding. The Witch feels like a story that you were told as a child, even though that story never existed. But it just feels like such a classic that you feel like you've been told this story before, even though you haven't. It's probably a weird way of explaining why I like The Witch, but that's why I like The Witch. This is 17 minutes long, so you have absolutely no excuse not to watch it. It's no question my favorite short film I've ever seen. Could be my favorite animated movie I've ever seen too. I just think if you sit down 5 people to watch World of Tomorrow, you're going to get 5 completely different reactions, and everyone is going to be right with their reaction, which is kind of weird to say. It's really funny. It's really charming. It's extremely thought-provoking, which you might not get if you're not exactly looking for it. It's hard to pitch this movie to everybody, but if you're into thinking about your life for 17 minutes, I guess throw on World of Tomorrow. It's pretty great. I would really recommend Midsommar to someone that's kind of just strictly been binging Disney Plus since quarantine started. It's really family friendly, has a lot of great things to say about relationships and friendships, and it's just something anyone could enjoy. Part of me was like, should I include Interstellar in this list? Because there are parts of Interstellar that deep down I know are just not good. Like the whole love is quantifiable logic is just so fucking stupid. It's Chris Nolan's most emotional movie by far. If you don't cry during this movie, I get it. You probably killed like 3 people. Some people will say this doesn't count. I don't really care. Black Mirror is a very mixed bag show for me. There are episodes of Black Mirror that I think are phenomenal. There are episodes of Black Mirror that I think are really bad. San Junipero is the best episode of television of all time. And there's a lot of great episodes that come close to that. You know, you got Ozymandias from Breaking Bad. You have any Game of Thrones season finale. You have Drake and Josh getting stuck in the helicopter.
We're on E! Well, maybe E means extra fuel!
The thing with Black Mirror is each episode has its own spin on technology and how technology could do whatever to harm us. But the way it's used in San Junipero is something I've always thought about. It's one of the things I always think about. And if you haven't seen this yet, I do kind of recommend Black Mirror the show, but if you just watch this episode, trust me, it's the best. This is another one I used to kind of think was overrated. I always liked La La Land. I never loved La La Land until I just rewatched La La Land, and now I love La La Land. Just from a filmmaking standpoint, this thing is so impressive. Like, all of the sequences with the songs are all extremely well done and all kind of unique from all the other ones that I don't really think you see in too many musicals. I think Emma Stone combined with Ryan Gosling is such a believable duo, and they just do such a good job of creating that genuine chemistry that I think pretty much every other movie tends to fail to do. And there's an aspect of Damien Chazelle's previous movie that I was always like, man, that's such an interesting thing to tackle in the life of an artist. And like I said, I'm into movies about artists. This movie is about artists. And what he's saying about being an artist, it hurts. But you know what? It's so good. This kind of reminds me of Interstellar. I think there are things in Boyhood that are objectively really bad.
I hate squash!
But you don't need to be a perfect movie to make my list. I think Boyhood, what it does right, it does exceptionally right. It is so relatable. I mean, it came out at a time where I was pretty much the same age as this kid growing up. And just going through that entire time capsule is so interesting. And especially in the second half, there are definitely certain things that the character goes through that I heavily relate to now at this point in my life. And Richard Linklater is my boy. I mean, Dazed and Confused, if you don't know, is my favorite movie. So I will always support what this man does. And this was definitely his best outing of the entire decade. The way he directs dialogue, not just writes dialogue, the way he directs dialogue just really makes it feel like he's speaking directly to you. And when a lot of other directors attempt to do that, it sounds very preachy and very fourth wall breaking. But when Linklater does it, it just feels so genuine. And it just, I don't know, it feels like a good mentor kind of just like telling you, hey, you're going to be okay. This is the same guy that made Midsommar, if you don't know. I love Midsommar. Midsommar is great. If you made it to this point in the video, don't watch it if you're strictly watching Disney Plus. But I do think I like Hereditary more. I looked at this entire list that I compiled, and even though it's not in the #1 spot, I will tell you I think Hereditary is the best movie on this list. I rewatched it recently, and I don't think I've ever seen a movie where literally every single second matters. There are details in the background of things. There are details in the way the camera moves. There are just details upon details upon details that I think this is the best horror movie I've ever seen, no question. It's hard to say because I really love funny games though too. And even though you will probably be scarred enough to not want to watch it again, it is one that gets better on repeat viewings because you will notice things that you did not even notice the first go around. It's on Amazon Prime right now. Highly recommend. I don't know if I highly recommend it. You will think very differently of me after watching Hereditary. This movie's just so fun, and that just rips the fun off of it in the last act. Wolf of Wall Street gets this rep of being the party movie. Like, I do have one of the posters, and my dad was like, yo, was that you in Cabo last year? And those sequences are definitely fun, and it definitely keeps this energy in Wolf of Wall Street that makes the 3 hours go by like that. It's the most fast, is that correct? The fucking fastest paced movie I've ever seen. The 3 hours fly by every single time. But I don't think people really talk about the last act and what Scorsese's really trying to say about greed, about how we take advantage of people, how power is money and money is power. The final shot is just, it's God tier. It's just Wolf of Wall Street. I would put it at Scorsese's number 2 best of all time. I think it's that good. This is another one. I don't think it's necessarily a really great movie, but I love Way, Way Back. I'm a sucker for coming-of-age movies. This is one of my favorite coming-of-age movies. I try to watch it at the beginning of every summer. I just like the story of this kid who's kind of shy and he's anxious, and then he goes and he works in this theme park, and he's got Sam Rockwell, this mentor. It's just a really pleasant movie to watch. When I was in my younger days, I was definitely a shyer kid, didn't really know what to do with my life, and then eventually kind of broke out of that and kind of started doing my own thing. And The Way, Way Back really reminds me of that time in my life and how you just kind of turn into someone completely different by the end of it. And I love it. I think The Way, Way Back is an easy to recommend movie to anybody, kind of like Midsommar. Before you say anything, this is the worst movie on the list, no question. That being said, I think the Inbetweeners movie is the best finale to any show ever. It is the British Superbad TV show. It is the best thing I've ever seen in television. I'm not even joking. San Junipero is great, don't get me wrong, but if I had to pick between San Junipero and the entirety of the Inbetweeners, I'm picking the Inbetweeners every time. I've seen the show countless times, and the movie is the finale to those 3 seasons, and it's great. I've seen the Inbetweeners movie so many times. I laugh my ass off every single time I watch it. You cannot watch this movie without seeing the previous 3 seasons. You won't think it's as funny, I guarantee you. I think you could find it like funny on its own, but you don't really get the peak level of comedy if you've seen the show before. And there's some heartfelt moments in here where I'm like, damn, that hits. It reminds me of my friends from back home every single time I watch it. And yeah, it's the Inbetweeners movie. I love it. It's not that great, but it is that great. Inception is the movie that got me into movies. It was the first time I was like, how did they do that? Then I went home, I Googled everything on like behind the scenes, and it just blew my mind. And I was like, yo, I want to make movies. I still think Inception is great. I think Inception gets hate all the time just because it is that good. People always hate the popular kid, and Inception is the popular kid in this point. And I will tell you, Inception still lives up to the hype every single time I see it. It's just so enjoyable, so creative, and just so refreshing to know that a guy like Chris Nolan is getting these huge budgets to make these movies that should not be just greenlit to have these big of budgets. And he's consistently putting out bangers, but Inception is just like, it's God tier for him. I do think I like The Dark Knight more. I know when it comes to Nolan, I'm the most basic Nolan version of a fanboy, but these two are just so good. There's no way I can't not mention Inception. There's very few people I would consider game changers in the craft of filmmaking. And off this one movie, I might put Xavier Dolan in that list. I'm someone that likes to play with aspect ratios when I'm filming. I just always thought it was cool. I did it before I saw this movie, but when I saw how this man played with aspect ratios in this movie, I was like, damn, that right there, I don't use this word a lot. That man is an artist. But that's just part of the reason Mommy's great. Mommy's comedic moments, the moments where it's like the feel good, the family's getting back together, everything's gonna be okay moments, and it's funny, it is hilarious. And then the moments where it gets dramatic, it is dramatic. It's some of the most well-crafted drama I've ever seen in my entire life. I get crushed every time I watch Mommy. I think I've only seen it twice now, but both of those times I got crushed. It's just one of the best movies ever made. I just straight up think Mommy is probably, like I always said, Hereditary is the best movie of the decade. I think Mommy might be like top 2 or 3 of the decade. It's just so good. And if you haven't seen it yet, you are really doing yourself a disservice because it is phenomenal. This movie really hit home for me. I think it is just a gift from God. Like, you know how God's real? Brigsby Bear exists. I think it's a very easy movie to recommend. I think anyone could enjoy it, but I think if you are someone specifically that wants to get into filmmaking, or, I mean, any art form will work for this, but if you are really dedicated on trying to be a filmmaker one day, and you have not seen Brigsby Bear yet, thank me later. Don't look up anything about this movie. I think it's really good if you go in kind of blind to it, but it's just great. Birdman is the best picture winner of all time for me so far. I mean, I haven't seen all of them. I've probably seen like 35, 36 of them by this point, but Birdman is the best of those that I have seen. The one take actually has a purpose in this movie. It's not just really a gimmick. People write it off as a gimmick, but when you look at the themes of the movie and the fact that it's supposed to be about this guy's play and making it one shot makes it feel like a play, it's just like, it feels essential. Like, you can't tell Birdman any other way. When you add that with possibly the best ensemble of the entire decade, some of the best acting all of these people in the ensemble will ever give in their entire life, mixed with the writing, mixed with the themes, art versus critiquing art, ego, relevance, just trying to create something that matters. Like I said, I've said this multiple times, movies about artists really get me. Birdman is phenomenal.
Hey! You're Rick fucking Dalton. Don't you forget it.
I really like Quentin Tarantino. I wouldn't put Tarantino in like my favorites, like top 10 favorites, maybe like 10 or 11, but I wouldn't really consider him one of my favorites of all time. But I never thought he would top Inglourious Basterds, because that to me is like one of my favorite movies. And then he dropped this one, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I was like, oh, that is better. But Once Upon a Time in Hollywood really spoke to me. I got what Tarantino was trying to say about himself, what he was trying to say about the industry. I think my two personalities, like my creative side and like my social side, are really just embodied in this movie in a way I haven't really seen before. It's like when I watch Dazed and Confused, now I just like feel attached to something because I can relate to it so heavily. Even though I haven't fought off the Mansons, there's a lot in this movie that just really hits home with me. I love it. It's so long and it doesn't feel long to me. The cast is great. It's my favorite Tarantino movie. What can I say? The best portrayal of Jersey ever. The best rom-com ever. I don't even know if I'd consider it a rom-com because it makes fun of rom-coms. It's kind of the whole point. One of the best movies about addiction ever. One of the best movies about love ever. It's just, I think Don John is the most underrated movie of the entire decade, no question. At least in terms of a movie that people know about, but don't really give the credit it deserves. Don John, it's just great. Joseph Gordon-Levitt is a phenomenal director. I don't know why he hasn't really directed anything since this of importance, but this man needs to make another movie. Don John is just, it's one of the greats. I relate to it so heavily. It's one of the most relatable movies I've ever seen in my entire life. And if you haven't seen this movie yet, watch it alone. This movie is scary. Like, I don't know how else to describe it other than it might be the most, like, terrifying movie on the list because of how realistic it feels for, like, heartbreak. And I don't know, when I first saw this movie, I'll be honest, I was in a place in my life where it didn't really hit me. And to put it lightly, fast forward a couple of years, I rewatch this movie, I'm like, yep, they did it right. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, yeah, it might be the best ending of all time. I don't really know what else to say about this movie. It kind of leaves me speechless to talk about. I will say, if you don't really like it the first time you see it, revisit it in a couple of years. Trust me. Don John was underrated in the sense that people kind of know what Don John is and don't really talk about it. Youth is underrated in the sense that no one knows what the fuck this movie is, and that's a shame. If we want to get real right here, I think about dying a lot. And the most important thing in my life is legacy. I'm constantly thinking about, what am I going to do when I leave behind? Because I might be dead before I even put this video on YouTube. I have no idea. And Youth takes that idea, combines it with surprise, being an artist, and those things just collide into a movie that is so severely not talked about that it makes me think, oh, like 40 years from now, Youth is going to be a classic. It's the movie that inspires me the most to just like go out and live my life. I'm not even kidding. It's one of the best scores and soundtracks of my entire life. I don't know. I play that all the time when I'm screenwriting. And if Old People sounds boring to you, yeah, don't watch this movie. You're going to hate it. But if you're someone that's constantly thinking about the legacy you want to leave behind, this movie's going to hit home. It's that close to being number one. It's so just personal to me. I just like the main five characters. I've been each and every one of those characters at least once in my life. And I feel like the fifth person is the person I am now and aspire to be now. And I haven't seen a movie I related to as much as mid-90s. It's written and directed by Jonah Hill, and it feels like Jonah Hill literally talked to me about my life and was like, yep, I'll take it down, and here you go, Chase. And movie means a lot to me. There will be people that watch mid-90s and are like, yeah, it's not really for me, not my thing, and that's cool. It is a really good movie, but it is like the perfect Chase movie. And that's what matters to me. That's why it's number two. But I do like one Just a tiny bit better. Whiplash is one of those unique movies where you could recommend it to everybody and they will all enjoy it. I think anybody could just find it as a very entertaining movie that you wouldn't expect to be entertaining because drumming doesn't sound like an entertaining subject. But the genius of Damien Chazelle is he makes it entertaining. But if you supplement your passion for the drumming, you really see yourself in this movie. And the fact that a lot of these movies were about being an artist, I don't think it's a surprise to anybody that my number one movie is literally about being an artist, being a young artist, being an aspiring artist, what it takes to be great. But Whiplash is like simultaneously the most inspiring movie and the most terrifying movie I've ever seen in my entire life. I didn't really want to talk about when I talked about La La Land because I thought it would kind of spoil what I wanted to say about Whiplash, but La La Land is all about letting go of somebody that you love because it might affect your career later. And Whiplash touches on that. But that is a subplot of Whiplash. This movie just has the checklist of everything it takes to try and even attempt to be great in art. And Damien Chazelle has talked about how maybe that's terrifying. Maybe that's a scary ending. And it's the movie that when I look back on this decade, I think it will always be number one. Mid-90s is very close to number one. It's just, I could literally talk about Whiplash for so long and how important it is to me, how important it is to every other filmmaker that probably has ever lived, and just the messages you could learn about life through it. I sound pretentious as fuck, but it is the number one movie of the decade for me. I've been doing it. Holy shit. I've been talking for way too long. Am I going to make YouTube videos again? Hopefully. If you want to like the video, that's cool. You want to subscribe? Even cooler. You want to dislike the video? That's cool too.